Hello and welcome to the Sami Parvez show. Today I'm joined by Sheena Sharp, a candidate in the Toronto Ward 15 by-election, which will be held on November 4th. We will be discussing about our election campaign and our goals for the Don Valley West and the city of Toronto. Thank you so much, Miss Sharp, to joining me on Sami Parvez show. It's a great pleasure to have you here.
Thank you for inviting me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, my pleasure. And just you break ice for being the first woman on Sami Parvez show.
I am honored.
Thank you. Okay. So yeah, I sent like requests to many individual politicians or journalists, but mostly like few of them received them because, as you know, like mainstream media always focus to major parties, and
Mhm.
major parties always give to interviews to mainstream media. So that's why. And as you are running as a counselor for Ward 15 for Toronto, Don Valley West. So what inspired you to put your name on the ballot in this by-election?
I have run in two previous elections. I've run in the provincial election, and I ran in the last um, uh, municipal election in this riding, and I came second, but
Yeah.
a very distant second,
Mhm.
just to be clear. I
Yeah.
could barely see Jay's dust in the distance. Um, so I am an architect.
Hmm.
Um, I have a successful firm. We design low carbon buildings. So
Hmm.
buildings that use very little energy and are all electric and um, uh, look towards materials that are not don't use a lot of emissions to create the materials.
Hmm.
So I realized at some point I was just really depressed about the impact that I could have.
Hmm.
Like, yes, we're producing buildings, one building at a time.
Yeah.
And yes, other architects are doing the same. So
Hmm.
you no longer have to prove that you can have an all electric building.
Hmm.
They're just fine. So so I decided that instead of going crazy, I would try to run and I've been running for the Green Party.
Yep.
Because that is the party that is most aligned to my heart.
Hmm.
Um, but and it does give me a platform, even though I haven't won. I get invited to community debates. I get invited to podcasts like this,
Hmm.
and it gives me a platform to explain the way that I see the world is that we could meet the UN climate targets. We
Hmm.
could um, greatly improve our housing and make it more match um, the needs of the population. We could do that, but we're not doing that.
Hmm.
And so I stand up and inject that voice into the discussion.
Hmm.
And so I think that in itself is useful.
Hmm.
I think in this particular race, there's a far greater chance of winning. So that's interesting.
Yeah.
But so, yeah, that's why I do it because I think it is a political question and
Mm.
it's being bogged down. Like people I'm going to be like, I'm 63,
Yeah.
right? I'm going to be dead by the time most of this happens.
Hmm.
But people like you, for example,
Yeah.
you are going to be in the prime of your life.
Hmm.
And the challenge is, depending on what we do right now, the
Hmm.
challenges that will face you in 20 years and in 30 years could be smaller or bigger.
Hmm.
And we do owe something to, we receive things from our parents. We do owe something to future generations, right?
Yep.
And so we have to look at that. And it is so frustrating because it is so possible to do it. And it's so possible to do it economically in an economically feasible way and maintain standards of living.
Hmm.
And we are not doing it because of all the misinformation
Hmm.
that is like flooding our social media platforms and media with lies. So that's why I do it.
Hmm. Yeah, okay, that's great. You brought up you are in architecture and just trying to build houses in low emissions, you know.
Mhm.
But so my question is, recently we saw last month the Union Station, Toronto Union Station was
Yeah,
flooded, you know, like
yeah,
the show inside of the shops,
yeah.
it was completely water. So is do you think is there a mismanagement in sewerage system or what's going on and who should be accountable for that and what would you do as a counselor to make it better or I mean like what's your take on this?
This is one of those tricky problems because it is the province has so much to do with it, right?
Mhm,
So Premier Ford actually has a report on his desk and has had for over half a year now on water management, and it's on climate adaptation generally, and there's
mhm.
a whole section on water management. And what it is really saying is that we, Toronto, even Toronto, as big as it is,
Yes.
we water doesn't know municipal boundaries. Like water pays no attention, right? And so
Mhm.
our watershed starts at the Greenbelt and goes to Lake Ontario.
Yeah.
And so and what you want when water falls is you want it to sink into the ground
Mhm,
to replenish the water table, to help things grow, um, to clean it effectively because the earth cleans water, right?
mhm.
So so what is happening, we have to essentially hold hands with municipalities, and this is partly what this report said. We have
Mhm.
to hold hands with other municipalities all the way from the Greenbelt to us,
Yeah.
because what is landing in it's the speed, really. So if you have a lot of rain um falling and it hits on a hard surface that it can't soak into, it goes really fast, right? And big volumes go really fast and then they dissipate.
Mhm.
And so we have to slow down the speed of the water that's coming, and
Yeah.
we have to hold hands with our municipalities north of us
Mhm.
to have a coordinated system of water management that focuses on clean water and and mitigating some of these types of things. Now, City of Toronto is already doing some of this kind of stuff.
Mhm.
Um, the new development at the bottom of the Don River actually has a floodwater relief system going through it, which is really cool and really cutting edge. The City of Toronto has also built a huge pipe. Part of it goes through Rosedale to take water from the north to the south, and that essentially makes it go more quickly, but it bypasses all of the Don the parts that where we have the biggest problems, like the
Yeah.
bottom of the Don Valley, Union Station, Liberty Village. So so I think we're all responsible, frankly. And we have to stand. Part of it is like people will say, oh, well, Premier Ford will never do anything. Well, stand up and tell him his own government says you have to do this, and let him publicly say he
Mhm.
won't do it. Like if we don't stand up with a logical and economical approach to things and say this is what needs to be done,
Mhm.
then you're giving people a free pass, right? You shouldn't
Yeah.
give people a free pass.
Yeah. But you said it should be told to Premier Ford to do it, you know, but what is
It's
the
Yeah,
yeah.
go ahead.
So what step should city must take is Toronto City Council, you know, like but there are some responsibility for council
Hmm.
too, you know, like for directing like a city manager or waste management supply like which under works under Toronto it means Toronto Council, you know, like what step would you take when you get elected as a councillor for Ward 15?
I think I would support working with other, like the city has a lot of the money, right? The
Mm.
infrastructure money,
Yeah,
as do the cities north of us
yeah.
to different extents. And so I would support the sorts of flood mitigation that they're already doing,
Mhm.
and I would do more. Like looking at flood mapping, allowing people to see flood mapping so they understand the impact on their homes.
Mhm.
and also protection of critical infrastructure. Like the fact that most of the west side of Toronto lost power was not because they were underwater. It
Yeah.
was because the hydro substations were underwater, right?
Yeah.
So we have to do something about that. We can't let the hydro substations flood out. And that's a particular local thing that we could do,
Yes.
right? So we really have to, the biggest thing is we have to push these things to the front and um also look at like I one of the other contenders is looking at low taxes, right? We have to pay less taxes.
Yeah.
But we all want clean water. We
Mm.
all want clean streets. We want our garbage taken away. We want our sewage taken away. And we don't want to be flooded out. That takes money, right?
Yeah.
So I think it's really about using money wisely, about figuring out what the best way of doing things is. And those are some of the ideas that I would support. And I'm sure that there are more to make us more flood safe because it's only going to get worse,
Yeah.
right? Because the way that when you look at the climate models going out,
Mhm.
yes, there is an overall increase in temperature,
Mm.
right?
Yeah.
But there's also an increase in spikes, so colder and way hotter at the top and at the bottom, and also an increase in the ferocity of storms. There's going to be bigger and more storms,
Yep.
and they're going to dump more water in shorter periods of time.
Mhm.
So we know that this is about to get worse.
Mhm.
And that's what I mean by like in 20 years when you are in, the prime of your life, shall we
Yeah.
say?
Yeah.
The whether or not you get constantly flooded out or you get flooded out of your home, like that's going to have a big impact on you, right?
Mhm.
Those are the kinds of things that impact people.
Yeah.
And then we can only really do that as a city. Individuals, you can only protect yourself so much if the
Mhm.
city is not protecting you,
Mhm.
right?
Yep.
So I think that that's really important. And it's really important to look long term.
Mhm. Yeah. So you brought up like other opponent, you were like proposing to lower the taxes, but for like taking care of all your facilities, so you need better facilities, so you have to pay more. Like if you are traveling, so if you want to have like a good seat or better facilities in a plane, so you must
Yeah.
pay more. But with respect to that, I also need to ask, you brought up like climate change and environment
Mhm.
as you also ran for Green Party. But
Mhm.
we also, this may not be a question with respect to your campaign, but I need to ask you, like we have a like carbon tax from federal government, like
Yep.
since Prime Minister Justin Trudeau took office,
Yep.
it was introduced, I believe, back in 2017, a carbon tax which some folks believes which is increasing the cost of living too. So what's your take? So do you support a carbon tax?
I say max the tax.
What do you think makes the tax? Oh, okay. So as we know, like the cost of living is going up. Like everything is like, it means the gas is going up, and the other groceries and
Yep.
the housing prices is also going up. So what should be done to tackle these crises?
I think so there are a bunch of different problems there you've listed, right?
Mm.
When it comes to carbon pricing,
Yeah.
like you got a check, didn't you?
Pardon?
Did you get a carbon check?
Maybe.
Yeah, that's a problem with the government. They're doing it when they actually do something right,
Yeah.
nobody knows about it, right? Like guys, you guys are such idiots sometimes. But
Mm.
um, so what that carbon tax is doing is actually trying, it's like the people who use more gas
Mm.
tend to be the people in the higher income brackets.
Yeah.
So it whether or not that's the purpose, what it's really doing is distributing money.
Mhm.
So if you have three SUVs on your driveway and a huge leaky house,
Mhm.
you will be paying more than you get back.
Mhm.
And something like 60% of Canadians
Yeah.
are paying a lot less, including groceries and all of that kind of stuff, right? So that's one issue, but that's certainly not, I was reading the report by the parliamentary budget officer. And I could have also, I'm sorry, I can't remember the precise source, but it's a very small portion of the cost that you're paying is a very small portion. What you're getting back is also a very small portion, right?
Yeah.
So if you got back like $250, that's not going to do much for your rent. $250 every 6 months is not going to do a lot for your rent, right? So they're actually very separate problems.
Yeah.
And also even on gas, like I live in a unit in a house, okay? We converted from gas to electricity. And when everyone else was complaining about the high prices of gas because of Ukraine, like I didn't even notice it. Like my costs stayed the same. And that because I made the house energy efficient, they are lower than what they used to be when I was on gas. Okay. So there's other things that you can do, which will actually put you in better economic health than you had before. When it comes to food, for example, I think that it is fairly obvious that the concentration of ownership in our grocery sector is having a huge effect on the prices of food. And the solutions that the Liberal government are coming up with are not adequate. Like things like, well, in this neighborhood, in this ward, we have a food store, Iqbal's Halal Foods. And so he was forced to leave his location because of Metrolinx. They're putting a new yard and office on that space, right? And so I am his architect, full disclosure. But trying to get through everything and get him moved, like it's still really hard. And he employs like 200 people, right? So when he has to shut down, that's 200 people who are no longer working, right? And so it was very, very hard to get everything to fall into place. But one of the issues, not the biggest issue, but one of the issues is he can't move into the mall, right? Because it has restrictions, because there's another food store. And so some of those sorts of things, when the government looks and says, oh, the thing that will solve this is bringing another foreign food store into the Canadian market because they can compete better. And if you look at how they compete by paying people really low wages, right? So we are not going to have a prosperous country if the prosperity is built on a whole class of people who are in poverty, right? That's not a prosperous country. So I don't think that the approach should have been to try to bring someone in who sells slightly cheaper food because they pay people very little, right? And there are some people who say, oh, that company can't come here because our minimum wages are too high. Yes. So what we need to do is have a more equal playing field among the 5 big grocery stores control 80% of the market, right? And then there's a whole bunch of independent grocers like Iqbal's. And so we need to make it an even playing field. And that playing field extends to suppliers, like being able to because you're the biggest game in town, being able to tell suppliers, oh, you can't sell to anyone else. That's part of the deal of getting in with us, right? So some of those sorts of monopolistic powers need to be curbed. And so our federal government said, oh, well, how about negotiating a voluntary code of practice? Like, how about making a mandatory code of practice with teeth and fines and all of that other stuff, right? Like, is this like, have we not thought of that? Like, come on. And so I think we have some of the solutions within our grasp, but we're looking to other places. it's like LCBO. I was listening to an expert on CBC whose name I can't remember,
Yeah.
but who said essentially, well, by making it private, you will find efficiencies, right?
Yeah.
And whether efficiencies just means paying people minimum wage. That's all it means.
Mm-hmm.
And minimum wage right now is about $30,000 a year,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So have you rented an apartment in Toronto recently? Because you're not going to get it for that, right? So so those sorts of efficiencies are not, they're useful short term. It's very short term thinking.
Yes.
Um, yes, the products at the LCBO will be lower,
Mm-hmm.
will cost less, right?
Yeah.
But long-term thinking, as you start to impoverish more and more parts of the population,
Yeah.
you diminish the prosperity overall, right? They can no longer afford to do anything but eat and sleep.
Mm-hmm.
And they can't contribute to the community. They can't, contribute to going to shows or going to anything like any sort of sports, anything that might enhance the quality of life, right? Run for politics. Yay.
Yeah.
Can't afford to do that. So I think that we have to look at our economy as a whole
Mm-hmm.
and start to say, okay, what is short-term thinking? What is long-term thinking?
Mm-hmm.
I
Yeah.
don't know.
Yeah. Do you have anything else to say?
No, I'm just hoping I answered your question.
Yeah, but I think you did, and
Okay.
very brief like answer. But again, so it means by licensing, like to giving a company who works in the city, like which comes from a city council, like it means they
Yes.
are responsible. So but as you mentioned, like when these big corporates like Loblaw and Metro
Mhm.
and so I think
Sobeys, whatever.
Sobeys,
Who owns Sobeys? Yeah.
yeah. So these big corporates,
Yeah.
like despite there are too many, but there is no competition. Like that government bring up like code of change, something like that,
Mhm.
to it mean lower the prices, but it does not make any impact. Like these big corporates.
Mhm.
But despite that, if you go buy 2 pounds oranges which cost you like $4, it's
Mhm.
too much.
Mhm.
uh yeah, it seems like they are pushing it. And earlier you said the taxes should be mixed, but I have two questions.
Only the carbon tax.
Okay,
Okay.
carbon tax.
That's the only tax that I think we
Okay.
should up. We
Okay.
should put more money from polluting consumers to the less polluting consumers. Listen, if you live in an apartment
Mm,
and you take transit,
yeah.
you are already you are already one of the lowest emitters in your city, in your neighborhood, right? That's just how it is.
Mhm. Okay. But these truckers, like which bring the food to the stores, or
Yes.
like they supply it. But when they refuel, like it means they are paying too many taxes, which it seems like which cost more. Like they are going to pay more, then they will charge more, then the price will go up. And due
Yes,
to
but the price as a portion of the cost of the orange
Mhm.
is less than a penny. It's
Yes,
like something like 0.0028.
yeah,
But the oranges went up many more pennies than that.
yeah,
So who is taking that increase? It's not the truckers
yeah,
and
yeah,
it's not the federal government.
yes. It's the corporates.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah, and if you are importing from China, where
Yeah,
it mean our like a dollar, like which is more, it means strength, as compared
yeah.
to Chinese currency. It mean we should not pay that much amount, or other South American countries. But despite that, we are paying too much for that. But that
Mhm.
is completely another chapter. We need to discuss about that thing.
Okay.
Yeah, but
Yeah,
but my
yeah,
concern is
yeah.
if you get elected, so would
Mhm.
you push the city council that it should not approve some license to some big corporate? They should not do business in the city because of their higher prices, as you brought up that you are an architect for a company like a small, like like independent store, but it was pushed out because another big chain wanted.
I shouldn't say he did find another spot. We are gonna finish that story and he will open it soon.
Yeah, he will open it
October.
soon,
Yeah.
but somewhere
Yeah.
else. But he was pushed
Yeah.
out,
He
like
was pushed out of his location and his options for new locations were very
yeah,
small.
yeah.
I think that the city, like we can do when the city does stuff that's not really in its power,
Hmm.
it does it badly.
Yeah.
Okay. So I think that every level of government, the reason why I run for different levels of government, every level of government has a responsibility for this.
Hmm.
And the city's responsibility should really be around zoning reviews. Like there used to be laws, and some of them were in Canada. It was bigger in the States, whereby you had covenants on the title that says you could not sell your house to a black person.
Yeah.
Okay.
Hmm.
So you had entire neighborhoods that were white.
Hmm.
And those sorts of things, I think, are more possible to influence at the city level than commercial rules around competition and things like that, which is really the Federal Competition Bureau, right?
Hmm.
And the biggest problem is that our levels of government uh, are not working together.
Hmm.
So we have a housing crisis in Toronto
Yeah.
because we haven't been building housing and
Mm.
we haven't been so we allow um, denser housing, mostly towers in a few areas
Yes.
and then nothing else anywhere else. And we also charge a lot of money to get those things approved.
Hmm.
Okay. So here we are in Toronto,
Hmm.
one of the cities that has a lot of existing immigrant populations,
Hmm.
right?
Yeah.
And when immigrants come to Canada, they often go to places where there are other immigrants from the same place, right? Because then you can get help
Hmm.
and you don't feel as lonely.
Yeah.
There are other people who speak your language, for example, right?
Yeah.
So you can hang out.
Hmm.
Um, and so Toronto is this, the federal government, like not this year, but last year, they were letting in 1.2 million people between students and temporary foreign workers, immigrants, and refugees, right?
Yeah.
We have 40 million people in Canada.
Hmm.
So the ability to absorb that
Yeah.
and the ability, like, I'm not against immigrants,
Yeah.
but why are we inviting people if they won't have a home?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
this is craziness, right? And I can't tell you the number of people when I've knocked on doors, like, this ward is kind of interesting. There are sort of um, more wealthy people in the north.
Hmm.
There are small pockets of really wealthy people, like Drake lives here, for example.
Yeah.
And then there is Thorncliffe Park, which are actually beautifully designed apartments
Hmm.
from the 60s, one of those high-rise sort of that density tower idea from the 60s.
Hmm.
Um, but but they most of the immigrants live there.
Hmm.
And they live in apartments that are too small for their families.
Yeah.
Like they're just and the rents because of our storm of not enough housing
Yeah.
and private housing is supply and demand, the
Hmm.
rents have gone up like
Yes.
40%, right? And so you look at this and it's perfect it's the perfect storm of one level of government like have paying no attention to what's happening, like believing the market will take care of it. We'll go and build where? Like an hour and a half north of the city. And
Yeah.
then where to and I know that it traditionally, if you look at Toronto, we've
Yeah.
had immigrants who start kind of in one location and then they move north or they move to like different spot,
Yeah.
right? Um, so that's kind of, I'm not saying that those kinds of things don't happen,
Yeah.
but they don't happen overnight and they don't happen with the level of crisis, I don't believe, that we have right now.
Yeah.
And so that sort of um so when we look at things like housing, we need to open up, change the zoning
Yeah.
because the like the Ontario Association of Architects did a study
Yes.
about 15 years ago.
Mhm.
I know it's been updated by the home builders, but this is the number I remember. On a 100-unit building, the time that it took to process the application was costing $40,000 a
Wow.
unit 15 years ago. And that is because a developer, and I don't believe developers are evil, by the way. That's not true.
Yeah.
They're business people like most other, but they're no more evil than the rest of us. Okay, let's put it that way.
Yeah.
So but they have to borrow money.
Mhm.
And then if the process takes 2 years to do one of the processes of the potential 3 processes,
Yeah.
if it takes 2 years, you have to pay interest on that money for 2
Mhm.
years, right? And it's a big amount of money.
Yeah.
So the, that is something that the city can do. The city has to understand the development industry and has to work in concert. So when the city stands up and says, oh, we're going to mandate 3-bedroom units, if it's not economically viable,
Yep.
people don't just build the 3-bedroom units and make the 1-bedrooms unaffordable. They just don't build, right? Yep. So the city has to work in concert to get the kinds of places that we need that are bigger,
Mhm.
that are family oriented, like 3 and 4 bedrooms, that are cheaper to build. So if we can build in wood, it's cheaper. And you can build up to 6 stories in wood. So we should just zone everything 6 stories. And the city is starting to do this, right?
Yeah.
So I would be a voice. That's what I ran on the last time, years ago.
Yeah.
And I would be a voice for continuing that and pushing that to allow for more more variety in housing. Like if you take some of the lots in the single family zone, you could build a house that looks about the same size from the outside, but could have three 3-bedroom units in it that could be affordable, right? Depending on all of these other factors. And so it's really a balance. It really takes a deep knowledge of the industry
Mhm.
and how to organize it. And it also takes a goal. Like, what are we trying to do in Toronto? I think we want a place. Right now, we're losing all of our families.
Yeah.
Like when people decide that they want to have children, they move.
Yes.
And so if we want Toronto to be a place where you can grow up safely and happily with parks and stuff, and you can move out of your parents' place, afford to live someplace other than their basement,
Yeah.
and you can get married, you can have kids, you can retire. If we want a community that has housing for all of those things, we have to set it as a goal. And we have to see where the opportunities are and make sure we enable and support those opportunities.
Mhm. Okay. But like it means mostly it is local government responsibility for the building houses, though it comes like from like 3 levels of government that should corporate, but at the end of the day, the local government should approve and everything, like
Yep.
which believes there is too much bureaucracy. What our opposition leader called there are too many red tapes, so it means those should be cut down, but do you think there should be some responsibility for the municipal government to take and process these things rapidly? I know you answered it very briefly, but do you think the municipal government has some responsibility? And as a councillor, would you take some further step to ensure that uh, those police or those things
Policies,
should,
yeah,
yeah, should be approved sooner than it takes like 2 years to be approved?
absolutely. And I think also we should reduce the number of things that even need approval.
Mhm.
Okay.
Yeah.
So right now there are 3 approvals.
Yeah.
There's rezoning,
Mhm.
there's site plan approval, and there's building permit.
Yeah.
And for the most part, I think we should have more areas
Mhm.
and more types of buildings that can be built with only a building permit.
Yeah.
Because building permit is health and safety.
Mhm.
So that is the biggest thing. And that is one of the biggest things I think I can contribute. And like consider this. Premier Ford said, "Oh, red tape. I'm going to pass a bill
Yeah.
that says they have to do it in 3 months.
Yeah.
And so that's what he did.
Mhm.
And so what every single municipality I have run into
Mhm.
and other people I've talked to have run into, what they've done is they took their 2-year process.
Yeah.
They took it out of the official process and called it a pre-process.
Mhm.
So then you go through the pre-process and then you're allowed to apply for the official process. And then you do it all again, only faster for 3 months. Okay.
Yeah.
I can't, every single municipality in Ontario has done this.
Yeah.
Has Premier Ford protested? No, he's not even paying attention.
Yeah.
He got his photo up that
Mhm.
said, oh, I'm going to cut red tape.
Yeah.
And then he did it in such an inept way
Mhm.
that, and he doesn't care about the outcome. He just seems like, what do I know about where his heart is? But he just seems to care about the photo op
Mhm.
and not about actually achieving something on the ground.
Mhm.
And so there are many ways that we can do this. Right now, the approval process that takes so long is spread across multiple departments, right?
Yeah.
So it goes here and it sits there for 2 weeks, then it goes here, and then someone's on holiday, and then it stays here, and then it goes here, and then it goes there. And then they dump all of these comments.
Mhm.
And I've seen comments, for example, from urban forestry that says, we need more trees.
Yeah.
And then from the garbage waste management who says, there's too many trees. And nobody says, what is the city's position on trees? They just give these two things to the applicant and say, you have too many trees and not enough trees. Go figure it out.
Yeah.
Like, there is no responsibility on the part of the city
Mhm.
for understanding what is possible and what is not possible,
Mhm.
and how what they want and what is possible might overlap,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
There are other things you want that are not possible.
Mhm.
Don't go there, right?
Yeah.
So I know that the city has made some strides in this regard.
Yeah.
The province did give the mayors, the municipalities, strong mayor powers, and everyone was upset about, democracy. Okay, I care about democracy, absolutely. But the part that actually is a bigger power is the power to rearrange the municipal civil service.
Mhm.
And all of the mayors who are like this, when they're going in, particularly if they call themselves progressives, they say, I would never use those powers. And it takes about 6 months and they're all using those powers, right?
Mhm.
Because if you actually, in the bottom line, no matter what color you are, if you actually want to get things done,
Mhm.
you are going to have to rearrange some
Mhm.
of the municipal departments.
Yeah. And is a conservative leader, Pierre Poilievre, who is expected by polls like would be the next prime minister. He always says that whenever he will fund to the local government for housing, so he would put a condition, like if you can build that much houses, your funds would be approved. So my question is there any shortage of funds to the city for building houses? And what do you take from leader of opposition words for making a condition for building houses?
I think Pierre Poilievre is it's hilarious, right? Because he was the one who said, it's your fault, Prime Minister Trudeau, that houses aren't being built.
Yeah,
And he knows it's a municipal
yeah,
requirement. And Trudeau's government said, oh, it's a municipal requirement. And they got a lot of backlash for that, right?
yeah.
So then they said, okay, fine, we'll take it on. We will do this and do something meaningful. And suddenly Poilievre's like, oh, how could you do that? Well, it's a municipal responsibility. Yeah. The whole thing is hilarious. But the money itself. So I have worked on projects. There's
Mhm.
actually a pretty famous person in our ward called Pat Moore,
Mhm.
and she has a street named after her. And what is she famous for? Well, in the 90s,
Yeah,
she actually took her privately owned apartment building and managed to buy it and turn it into a nonprofit.
Wow.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And when you do that, what happens is a nonprofit is a private company.
Yeah.
But what happens is in their bylaws, it says that they cannot charge more rent
Mm-hmm.
than what it costs to run the building.
Yeah.
So even if the demand is really high and the supply is low, even if they could get an extra $1,000, they can't
Yeah.
because they have agreed, but the building is not in trouble. It's getting the money it needs to run and maintain and all of that other stuff, right?
Yeah.
So this is the money to build housing comes from the private sector,
Yeah.
including the nonprofit sector,
Mhm.
which is essentially private with a different goal, right?
Yes. Yes.
But the conditions on into which you can build housing come from the city.
Yeah.
So the city said you can only build housing, increase the density in these 5 areas. One of those areas is Yonge and Eglinton,
Mm.
which is just beside our ward,
Mm.
right? It's kind of weird. Our ward has a little jot cut out of it. That's Yonge and Eglinton that they cut out. So Yonge and Eglinton has like, I think one of the towers is 54 stories.
Mhm.
It's got 40, 30, 35, 40, all the way marching along. And that is the most expensive type of housing to build. Okay. I was looking at the Altius's cost consulting report, Altus, sorry, cost consulting report, and it said something like 350 for the building alone, as opposed to like 250 for wood frame. So you have what we've essentially, when I say the conditions, the problem is it's so complicated. I'm afraid I'm not explaining it well.
Mhm.
But if you say you can only build here in this type of building, and it happens to be the most expensive way to build,
Mhm.
as opposed to saying all of these other streets over here, you can go up to 6 stories, which is a less expensive way of building.
Mhm.
That's where
Mhm.
the city's regulations
Yes.
start to impact. And then there's what the regulations say, and then there's the speed of approval. So those two things, what the regulations say, allowing to build types of housing that are less expensive
Mhm.
with fewer approvals.
Mhm.
That is the goal, because we could increase the number of housing,
Mhm.
and we could increase the types of housing,
Mhm.
and hopefully increase the price points
Mhm.
so that more people can afford to live in Toronto.
Mhm. Okay. So let's jump to another topic.
Yep.
With crime. Crime rate is going up. You know, like every day. I don't think a day pass by we don't hear something happen in Toronto. You know, like we also saw in the bus stations, like also there were some like crime occurred during, I think, then the city asked the police should be near substation. But so what should be done to prevent these criminal activities?
Okay, so first off, I don't think crime is going up.
Mhm.
It has been coming down.
Okay.
Um, we do have crimes that get a lot of publicity.
Mhm.
And some of them are mental health related,
Okay.
and some of them are extremist related,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
And so neither of those two things
Mhm.
are anything that the police can do anything about.
Mhm.
Like if we want to have 50% of us being police, and so one policeman follows around the non-policeman, like how could you possibly have
Yeah.
enough police to be able to their very presence
Yeah.
to be able to stop this? It's nonsense. It doesn't make sense to take that approach.
Yes.
I take the subway regularly.
Mhm.
I also cycle, and I also have a car. So I do whatever seems to be the most useful at any time. I've never felt unsafe in the subway
Mhm.
any more than and I don't feel unsafe walking the streets, although more and more I'm a little bit nervous.
Mhm.
But those sorts of things really have to do with the province and how they're dealing with mental health
Yeah.
and how they're dealing with supports for people who have disabilities, including mental health disabilities,
Yeah.
and having them giving them, what is it right now, $1,500 a month or something? Like you can only live in a tent in Toronto on $1,500 a month.
Yeah.
That is it, right?
Mhm.
And so these are problems that we can solve to a certain extent,
Mhm.
like in our ward.
Yeah.
So not more than 200 feet from where I live, there is a hotel
Yeah.
that was decommissioned, and during COVID, the city were bringing homeless people into the hotel.
Mhm.
Okay. Uh, a hot, I know for a fact there are many people in the rich areas who are uh, drug addicts. Okay. There are some. Okay. Just if you have money, it's easier to hide and it's easier to do what you need to do. So,
Mhm.
but we had a lot of drug addicts among these people, and we had theft.
Yeah.
We had people doing drugs in backyards.
Yeah.
We had needles being left all over the place.
Mhm.
The solutions are actually things like safe injection sites, because then if the needles are in a safe injection site, they're not in a playground, right?
Yeah.
And the people in our neighborhood, the people, I should say, some of the churches, and I have to say the churches from the wealthier neighborhoods
Mhm.
stepped up
Mhm.
and they came in and said, what is the problem here and what can we do?
Mhm.
So they started giving welcome baskets
Mhm.
to the people who the city was bringing off the streets,
Mhm.
because you need a certain amount of you need cutlery, you need blankets, you need stuff to live in a shelter,
Yeah.
right? So they were making sure people had everything. And it's also a gift, right? And
Yeah.
so a gift from the community to someone creates a bond between people,
Yeah.
right?
Mhm.
And the city was saying they were moving people through there. The longest was about 8 months, usually around 6 months. They were moving people to more permanent housing.
Mhm.
But so what happened, and what started out as a neighborhood like in, uprising, like how can you possibly do this? Put it somewhere else. Like where? But somewhere else, right? And so instead of that, because our neighborhood stepped up, because people in our neighborhood stepped up
Yeah.
and and instead of rejecting people, welcome people, the problem essentially went away.
Yeah.
And I spoke to the one of the main people who was against the hotel being used by homeless people, and he agreed. Like the problem had essentially gone away. And
Mhm.
the city was also cleaning up needles. They weren't allowed to put a safe injection site on the site because the property owner has to agree to it, and they wouldn't agree.
Yeah.
So there was that problem, but the city was dealing with that with putting extra people in to make sure that the playgrounds and everything were always clean.
Yeah.
So, it's not impossible. And not only is it not impossible, maybe the knee-jerk reaction isn't the reaction that's going to work. Like we want a reaction we want something that works. And yes, you can say, oh, well, it should go somewhere else. Like some other neighborhood should have this problem. Like,
Yeah.
or like, what is that as a solution? Really? That's not a solution.
Yeah.
That.
So do you think city did enough like to resolve these homeless? As you said, the crime is going
No,
down.
no, not even the crime is not going up.
Yeah, as you said.
No, they have not done enough. And they also, I think we have to seriously look at police,
Mhm.
because our taxes,
Mhm.
25% of the property taxes in the city of Toronto
Mhm.
go towards the police.
Mhm.
And the police do not allow any scrutiny of what they're doing.
Yeah.
Okay. So we have, apparently, like I read a book called The Crisis in Canadian Policing,
Mhm.
but it's from a citizens research group
Yeah.
that includes John Sewell, one of our former mayors
Mhm.
of Toronto.
Yeah.
And there's many things in the book that are really interesting, but one of the things they say is putting two people in a car and driving around is the least effective way of stopping crime. It's just Like, what exactly are you expecting to people to be doing in the open on the street,
Yeah.
right?
Mhm.
You know, you'll catch people who don't have the right license plates or something, but so really the crimes have been changing.
Mhm.
I think like, I've stood in the richest neighborhoods on doorsteps and they say, the cars get stolen and the police don't come.
Yeah.
I've stood in the poorest areas and they say, our catalytic converters get stolen and police don't come, right?
Yeah.
I think that there's a common thread here. We don't have effective policing,
Mhm.
and and I think that they should be held accountable to that. Like they just like all the rest of us have, performance indicators and for a business, it's like, are you still in business this year? Or did you make all your customers angry? Right. So so for a business, it's can you keep your customers happy? The police don't seem to have those key performance indicators. Like more and more politicians are being threatened with death.
Mhm.
Have they ever caught any of these guys or women? I don't know.
Yeah.
But
I heard like something like use like that some like politicians were threatened or received threat or the
mhm,
like their office were like vandalized. Yeah,
mhm,
I heard these things. Yes.
mhm. And are they catching those people?
I
Because that's what, like
no,
these are modern crimes,
mm,
right?
mm,
Or big corporations overcharging you, or
yeah,
big corporations like lying about, oh, you didn't return that or whatever, right?
yeah,
Those are petty crimes,
mm,
but the petty crimes today are being committed
yeah,
by corporations and they're also being committed by people there. But some of the more serious crimes, like the police aren't solving them.
mhm,
And even when they get told where a car is, it's like, oh, well, that's a different police.
so,
That's a different group of police. Like, can't you work together? Like,
mhm,
can you play together in this sandbox? Because it's ineffective if you can't. So I really think we need to follow the stats.
mhm,
Crime is not getting worse,
yeah,
but certain types of crime are much more prominent.
yeah,
And it's sad because people say, oh, well, the TTC is not safe.
mhm,
But, what about that guy who mowed down 13 people on Young Street,
mm,
and the the guy who killed the Muslim family with a van, right? Two
yeah,
different van,
yeah,
and the same thing happened. Someone used a van on uh the Danforth in the Greek restaurant area of Toronto
mhm,
to kill a bunch of people,
yeah,
like just like taking out the sidewalk.
mm,
Like, where are we in finding those people?
mhm,
And the people who are vandalizing businesses. I mean, we get separated. We get, oh, it's the Muslims. Oh, it's the Jews.
yeah,
But most of the people who are Muslims and Jews aren't doing this, right?
mm,
The whole city would be in chaos if that was true.
yeah,
So we have to catch these particular people.
mhm,
And and how successful are we? We only catch them after the fact, right?
yeah.
Like,
Yeah. But as you brought up, like it means police is not doing enough
mhm,
or they are not doing their job very well
they're
and
not
they are
being effective.
effective. Yeah.
Yeah.
They are just keep pointing finger like, oh, this is not my jurisdiction or this is not my or somebody else like another
Mhm,
like law enforcement agencies duties and
mhm.
also like we saw like the car theft is going up and recently federal government also introduced they would scan the those uh, I forgot its name but it means what do you call it?
Like the VIN number or what do you?
No, like that a big uh that tanker. I don't know, but it means
Okay.
they introduce something to scan. Yeah, those. I sorry, like I don't recall it,
Yeah.
but it means they would scan it. Recently, they introduced, but it seems like for a long time, there is a carjacking, ongoing. But it seems like neither the local law enforcement agencies or the provincial. or federal, like it means
Yeah.
and also none of those level of government were serious on this concern until then.
Yeah.
As you also mentioned that whenever you go to door knocking and you also air that it means you don't need to come in and it means maybe there would be some concern for them.
Mhm.
So what should be done? It means the police should be more efficient and should take more responsibility for doing its job properly.
I think I'm not an expert, but I realized in reading that book
Mhm,
that there are many experts out there
mhm,
and that they do have effective solutions and that our police should be willing
mhm,
to have discussions about why or why they are not using some of those solutions and how exactly um, we are measuring the types of crime and whether or not we are catching people and the crime is actually going down.
mhm,
Or is the crime, like in terms of people who are schizophrenic, for example, like mental health issues that are not under control, like that's a really tough one,
mhm.
right? Because they can actually hurt people, like they can hurt police.
Yes.
So it's really hard to make that judgment call about what you would do and what you would not do.
Mhm,
But some of those things are kind of like up, they're not like the police are the ones at the front line, but
mhm.
the problems are actually created somewhere else,
Yes.
right?
Mhm,
And so all of those, I think all of those things as a discussion right now, all we have is politicians who say, I support the police.
yeah.
I don't support the police. Like, and some of the politicians who support the police, it's like, well, the police are tough and I want to be tough. So
Yeah.
I'm going to support the, like, it's not about blanket support.
Yeah.
It's about, are you doing your job? And are you doing your job in the best way possible? Because we spend a lot of money
Mhm,
on the police.
yeah.
Like the idea that somehow they're poor,
Mhm,
like the province capped the salaries of nurses
mhm,
and they capped the salaries of teachers. They
yeah.
did not cap the salaries of police or firefighters.
Mhm,
You might think about what is common to those two groups.
yeah.
But, and so we look at this and has it done anything? Not that I know of.
Mhm,
So it's not, I don't think it's about money. Um, and that has also been proven with data. Like after you hit a certain point, greater or lesser crime is not really about how much money you give the police.
mhm,
And a lot of it is about demographics.
mhm,
So, you know, excuse me to present company, but young men tend to commit more crimes than any other group of people,
mhm,
right? And so as we end up with more middle-aged people and less young men,
mhm.
crime just goes down without doing anything, right? But that's not to say, I think there's still a lot of corporate crime, a lot of preying on people, a lot of preying on vulnerable people. I was so embarrassed about the way that some of the international students are being preyed upon, right? That we are bringing, it's embarrassing as a country
Yep.
to have people forced into prostitution, some people, right? That's so totally embarrassing.
Mhm,
And so those are the types of things that I would put on the list of stuff we have to solve.
yes. Mhm. Yeah, I was saying like containers. So now they will scan like containers before like shipping,
Yes. Yeah.
a container scanner. So government is spending, I don't know, they said the crime is down now 17% at 7. It is unclear yet, but they recently
Mhm.
introduced, but that is federal government job, like to do with it. It is nothing to do.
Well, no, that's the problem. It is the federal government has a part, our local police have a part.
Yeah.
You know, the what do you call them? The dock police, the there's a lot of security around our docks, right? To having to do with goods coming in and out.
Yeah.
Those guys are part of those are federal government. So all of these people have a responsibility.
Yeah.
And if they're not working together,
Yes.
that is something citizens should be concerned about.
Mhm. Yeah. As you mentioned, you went like you have been door knocking. So
Mhm.
what you are hearing from those constituents or from that riding particular you are running in? So what do you hear? What are their most concerning problem on this by election?
Um, well, we've just started,
Yes.
but I have been door knocking for 2 years,
Hmm.
just because we door knock all the time.
Yes.
Um, and I think that housing is one of the top issues.
Hmm.
And as I know I've talked about this already,
Yeah.
but but it actually takes different forms.
Hmm.
Like in the south of the riding, it's both the size of the housing and the cost of the housing.
Yeah.
We have current rent strikes
Yeah.
on in our ward right now,
Hmm.
which is people who are refusing to pay rent but are paying
Yes.
it into a trust,
Yeah.
right?
Hmm.
Um, and so and that has to do with not only the size but the maintenance and repair
Yeah.
of the like elevators constantly being broken down,
Mm.
garbage in the hallways, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Um, so I knock on those doors in those buildings, in
Yeah.
the apartment buildings. So that they are, and a lot when you talk to a lot of immigrants, as I said before, they are they thought that there would be more opportunities in Canada,
Mhm.
and they thought they would be able to have a garden, for example,
Mhm.
right? And so and so that is kind of tough to talk to those people
Mhm.
because I'm not sure all those problems can be solved in any time that will help, that will be beneficial to them, right?
Yeah.
That when you talk about it in people get it. Like some people think, oh, all those rich people in houses.
Mhm.
But most of those rich people in houses, they have kids.
Mhm.
Some of their kids are living in their basement.
Yes.
They would rather that not be the case. They would rather their kids be able to live on their own
Mm. Yeah.
and become independent.
Yeah.
They also, for a long time, some of the richer Torontonians were buying houses for their kids
Yeah.
to reduce a mortgage for their kids.
Yeah.
The housing costs are so high that most of them can't do
Yeah.
that anymore, right?
Mhm.
And also, I was talking to one guy because it's really about social connection
Mhm.
and like it's not your investment. The house you live in is it may be an investment, but it's not just an investment. So I was talking to one guy who was living in a pretty nice house, and I was saying like if we don't have more housing that's cheaper for young families,
Yeah.
like you're going to have to drive an hour to see your grandchildren.
Yes.
And he became really sad and he said, I have to drive 3 hours.
Mhm.
So it's about the quality of the community. It's about being able to if intergenerational families live close to each other, it's really easy to say, hey, mom, can you look after the kids
Yes.
while I go and do this errand?
Mhm.
Right?
Yeah.
And those types of interactions
Yeah.
improve the richness of life,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
And so at one level, it's about being able to afford it and being a big enough space for a family. But on another level, it's about social interaction and it's about so some of those people in the big houses, they don't need the big houses anymore,
Yes.
right? But they look around and they say, where could I move to
Mhm.
that's close?
Yeah.
Because they usually belong to some kind of religious institution, or they have different clubs they belong to, or friends they've grown up and have known forever that they go to, some of like they go to lunch every month or something like that. They have all of these things, which are really a support system, which is really what makes healthcare cheaper in the
Mhm.
long run, right?
Yes.
But so what they really want to do is move to a place that they can afford, that they won't be kicked out of,
Mhm.
that they know that they won't be kicked out of,
Yeah.
that's close by. And we're not building those kinds of things, right? We're building shoe boxes. one-bedroom shoeboxes
Yeah.
in 40-story towers.
Mhm.
So that, when you look at that, we don't have enough of those. It's really about putting, like, when people say putting community first,
Yeah.
building more different types of housing is putting community first.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, and also like I was reading yesterday, I believe a report, as you also brought it up, that it means tenant the rent, like they are not paying their like rents, it means the landlord cannot kick them out from their houses, though
Hmm.
landlord like own it, but they cannot kick out the tenant. And also like due to I number of people, like it means the demand is going up, and
Yeah,
also the price is going up, like
yeah,
what it's supposed to be just $1,000, you
yeah,
can get a two bedroom or three bedroom, at least you could afford an apartment. But
yeah.
now you cannot get an apartment like that unless you don't pay 2,000 and maybe more than that, and
Oh, more
yeah,
than
it
that.
could be
Yeah.
more than that. Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm
And
talking about this region.
a house is like 4,500
Yeah.
if you want
And
to rent a house.
yeah,
Yeah.
we were renting just a year ago, like we were paying just 3,000 in
Yeah.
Kitchener, like
Yeah.
this is terrible, just
Yeah.
three bedroom.
Yeah.
Yeah, and yeah, so there shouldn't be there a bylaw one for it mean there should be a minimum rent, like first. And second, there should be a bylaw that if a tenant is not paying its fair rent on time, they should be kicked out. Because I believe during COVID time, the provincial government gave more lenient to the tenant, which means they cannot kick them out because they could be jobless due to,
Yeah.
well, no, they will be homeless, due to job
Yeah.
crisis, and many businesses shut down. So don't you think we should have a bylaw like that to it means to secure that landlord? Also, there should be a uh, fair amount of rent to secure the tenant. And also, as you mentioned about we need more housing and different kind of housing, what people are looking for. It means our family should live together. It means like when children grow up, so they need their
Hmm.
houses, their own houses, because they cannot live there. But they cannot purchase. They purchase something to neighborhood where are they living, and they should be with their family members.
I think that it's easy to say,
Mhm.
there should be rent control, and there
Yes.
is.
Mhm.
Um, but in the bigger picture, you cannot, like, for buildings that already exist,
Yeah.
um, we need stronger ability to throw tenants out who don't pay. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay. Number one, particularly in the smaller landlord category. Um, and I'm a small landlord. In
Yeah.
order to afford the place I live in, I live on the top floor
Mm.
and I rent out the floors below as one unit.
Yeah.
Um, and and I keep tenants for a long time
Yeah.
because they're happy.
Mhm.
But prices keep going up.
Yeah.
Like the municipal taxes just went up 10%.
Yes.
Um, the house insurance has gone up, like it was just over 6%
Mm.
this year.
Yeah.
And the amount that you can increase rent is 2.5%.
Yeah.
So, at some point, what we really want is the government. There is a power of the private companies and private landlords, including small landlords and big landlords.
Yeah.
And at some point, the government has to set goals, but you cannot set a rule that will mean the government suspects that everyone is making a huge amount of money,
Yeah.
right? They're greedy. But that's very easy to say because no one can check. right? And so you only know that it's not true when housing stops being built because the cost doesn't work anymore.
Yep.
So if we're relying on private businesses, which I think we should, to develop housing,
Yep.
we need to be aware of, yes, we need to push them. Yes, we need to get what we need as a community, but we need to be aware that there is a limit. It has to be, as they say, pencil. The amount that you'll get has to equal the amount that it costs, right? Or higher than the amount that it costs. So that is why I think we're out of balance with nonprofits, because it's been shown in other areas of the world that the more nonprofits you have, they keep even the private rents down.
Yep.
Because if it's 50% nonprofit, then there's a better chance that you could move to a nonprofit if your landlord hikes the rent, right? And so having nonprofits is kind of like a safety valve. And we stopped building nonprofits in the 1990s. So here we are 30 years later, and we're in a housing crisis. Like this was predictable. So I think the city itself, like the province controls rent control. The city controls maintenance, like the municipal bylaws and the building code gives cities the authority to order people to fix things that are broken, right? Houses that are broken, windows that are whatever, elevators that are broken, all that kind of stuff. They can issue orders. The city is fairly ineffective because they issue orders, but then nothing happens because they really need more teeth to be able to, but they also at the same time need to be able to understand what the economy of a building is, right? And I know in a place that will remain nameless, I found I was in a building doing some other work, and I found this apartment that had just one of those sliding closet doors as its front door, like no security, no nothing. And I went quietly to the building official and I said, like, shouldn't this be shut down? Like this is blatantly illegal. It's against the municipal property standards. And he said, yeah, I could do that. And those guys would be on the street. So what do you want me to do? Right. So it's tricky. It's always a balance. I think we have to understand what the situation is and move slowly with regulations to make it better. And what is really in the cities, the property taxes are not in the city's bailiwick, and favoring nonprofits is not really the city's responsibility. That's the federal government's when they do the funding, when they do funding that funding for developers, the federal government does that. So favoring nonprofits, the city making land available in a municipal land trust, like all of those sorts of things are things that the city could do with, I think, the ultimate goal of harnessing the power of the developers to do what we want built, not what we don't want built. And so that we can keep it more, and what we want built is more affordable. So that is that's really the city's responsibility, maintenance and zoning, and then really pushing the other levels of government to provide funding for more nonprofits.
Yeah, and do you support to lower the taxes like property tax?
No, I don't support raising them either. I support clean water, clean, well-repaired streets, clean parks, sewage, waste management. We need money to do that. So
Okay.
I support as efficiently as we can do and paying what we need to get that done.
But you don't support what has been proposed like last time, like they went up for 10%. You don't want that should be lower, and you don't want to go it up also.
No, I don't have any opinion that says always lower taxes or always raise taxes. That's craziness, right? That's not serious. If you're serious, you look around and you say our streets are in really poor repair. Like we all, everything that's invisible,
Yeah.
we just think somehow by magic it's happening, right? Look
Mm.
at Calgary.
Yeah.
They lost their clean water.
Yes.
Like,
Mm.
what would happen if that happened here?
Mhm.
Like, do you not want to pay to keep our water system in really good shape?
Yeah.
Yes, we do. And whatever it takes, we're going to do that.
Mhm.
But at the same time, I think we could get, and when I say efficient, I don't mean paying people less.
Mhm.
I mean, why does this approval go from this desk to this desk to this desk to the, like, why can't we have all the approvals in one department? Like that's one solution. There are many others, but why can't we streamline that process? Like, I mean, true efficiency.
Mhm.
How can we get money out of that? And we need to wait until we get that
Mhm.
before we lower taxes, because otherwise it just comes in the form of not fixing roads,
Mhm.
not and it's so funny. We all point at each other. Like, the rich part of the neighborhood says, look, 6 weeks ago we had a windstorm. All these trees are down in the park. No one has cleaned it up. All the waste baskets are overflowing. They're mad. I go to the poorer part of the neighbor the thing and they say, those rich people get everything. Look at our parks are a mess. The trees have gone down. Like, no, you don't get it. It's everywhere, people. It's everywhere.
Yeah.
And we need to look at those basic services,
Mhm.
and we need to figure out, the we need to put more money into it.
Mhm.
I think bottom line, we need to put more money into it.
Okay. So what's your message to Ward 15? Why should they vote for you?
Why should they vote for me? Because I think I'm real and I'm practical. I'm not dealing with slogans. I
Mhm.
know a lot because I have been at the receiving end of the city's bureaucracy, and that's the best way to learn how it works. So I know how it works, and I have a vision for making our city better.
Mhm.
Like, I think we could have a really bright future that is prosperous and that meets the climate change requirements,
Mhm.
where we all have reasonable housing. I think that is possible. But we have to be adults in the room here. We have to understand that we're going to have to pay for that, and we have to figure out how to make it so that we can afford it. That's what we have to do.
Okay. And do you have anything else you would like to say which was not discussed?
Uh, no, I think the only other thing that I would like to say is that the one of the things, if you look at the city of Toronto and greenhouse gas emissions,
Mhm.
it's almost 50% buildings, 50% transportation. That's because we're a city, right? We don't have a lot of heavy industry and that kind of thing. And I know that we have to essentially, the only thing we know we have to do is stop burning gas.
Mhm.
And we have to essentially do this in 20 years, 2045, right?
Mhm.
And for buildings, that is a long time.
Mhm.
Like changing the way we build buildings or deal with buildings. And the city could hit that goal if they start to have a plan to remove the natural gas system, to switch over to electric. Like when your furnace dies, when a building's heating system dies, the owner already has their checkbook out, right? Because they're freezing.
Yep.
You switch it to electric instead of keeping it in gas.
Mhm.
And you slowly bring it down and you make sure that the people who have no money are not unduly impacted. And I think that that is something where everyone, I think I haven't read all, like, there's now 10 people running, I think. But
Mhm.
so far, I don't think anyone is really talking about climate action.
Mhm.
And also the fact that if we actually meet the challenge of
Mhm.
climate action, it is far easier for us to ask other places in the world.
Mhm.
But I should point out that there are like 20 countries who are the problem,
Yeah.
and Canada is number two
Mhm.
per capita behind Saudi Arabia.
Yeah.
Like that is where we are in terms of this problem.
Mhm.
And there is so much lying going on.
Mhm.
And oh, you can't heat a building electrically. Oh, we're going to go nuclear and that will take 10 years. It's a PowerPoint presentation. It's not there's no proof of concept, right? So all of these things we need to seriously look at. And the good news is that if we do seriously look at them,
Mm.
we will be more prosperous.
But you think like Canada is behind Saudi Arabia for gas emission, but don't you think Canada is doing enough for the gas emission? And
No, no,
we have the most cleanest oil or gas
no,
in the world,
no.
China,
You're
India.
listening to the big oil companies, many of whom are not Canadian, by the way. And they say, oh, well, we're the clean. And also the other thing they say is, oh, we're also the most human rights gas
Mm,
in the world, right? The point is, we need to stop making gas, period.
mhm,
And so whether or not you're the most human rights, we're not the cleanest,
mhm,
whether or not you're the most human rights is not the point. You know, whether or not we still need gas as we transition off it in
mhm,
the next 20 years is not the point.
mhm,
The point is we need to do that. The science is clear. Like, and you like wildfire smoke, like heat waves, all the things that are happening.
mhm,
Like it is clear what we have done to ourselves. And it
mhm,
is clear that we have to step up and take responsibility as citizens of the world and as some of the biggest emitters
mhm,
to reduce our own emissions, right? That's a kind of responsibility to future generations. That's a kind of integrity that I think we have to have.
mhm,
And people are afraid of it. We're like children clinging to our blankie, right? Like, I'm so afraid if you take it away, bad things will happen. Like, no, they won't. They will not. Bad things will not happen. We
mhm,
will be fine. We can do this. We are smart. We are energetic. We have the money. We can do this.
mhm. Okay, Miss Sheena Sharp, it was a great discussion with you.
Yes, I
There
enjoyed it.
were a
Thank
lot.
you.
It was, thank you. Okay, so I will leave it here and wishing you very best
Mhm.
for Toronto Ward 15 by-election. And
Thank you.
yeah, my pleasure. And yeah, you take care. And thank you again for joining me on Sami Parvez show. And I hope I see you again.
Yes, I hope so too. Thank you. Thank
My
you.
pleasure. Thank you. Yeah.
Okay. Bye.
Bye-bye. Thank